Well, good morning, afternoon, evening, whatever time of day it is for you, wherever you are, whenever you're watching this, welcome. And I'd like to begin also by welcoming our guest teacher today, Jill Wener. Jill, thank you for joining us, taking time to be with us.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course, it's our pleasure. And also appreciation for our group on Zoom that's watching us, our teacher community, and for Mark Foreman of Sing to the Mountain Studio, and Michael St. John, who's assisting and co-hosting. So, welcome everybody. And just like to move to welcoming Jill, who is a nationally renowned expert on physician wellness. So Jill is a physician, Dr. Jill Wener. And briefly, you have led physician wellness programs around the country and are leading them, and lectured at the national level on stress and on the benefits of meditation and tapping. So we'd love to hear a little bit about tapping as we go along today. You hold online and in-person meditation and tapping programs and lead meditation retreats globally. Have you traveled much in terms of leading meditation retreats, or is it like these days mostly on Zoom?
I've been doing them in the country. I had a big retreat planned in Bali in June of 2020, and that certainly did not happen, and that has yet to be rescheduled. I believe our deposit has been lost, but for now, international event planning is off the table. It's too stressful.
Sure, I agree with that.
No, I'm leading a retreat starting tomorrow. Actually starts Tuesday at Miraval Spa in Arizona for women in healthcare. So I've been doing events in the continental U.S. and luckily have managed all my events have been like at a valley rather than a peak. So it's been really grateful for that.
Yeah, I love that. So along with all of that work with meditation and tapping, you're also doing some work with anti-racism with your partner, and you've written a book on that, I believe. So we also would love to hear a little bit about that as we go along. However, most of these sessions were beginning with looking at an inspirational background of your moving into this path. And in your case, it's one, being a physician, and then two, moving from that into, however that happened, meditation, tapping, anti-racist work, that kind of thing. So wherever you'd like to begin at the beginning of that path, we'd be inspired to hear
it. Sure. So I think my path has always been extraordinarily traditional and non-spiritual and anxious and type A and all of the kind of typical doctory personality things that you would mention, that you would not mention, that you would maybe stereotype in your brain. In 2011, I was 5 years into my career as after my training. And I just got really, really burnt out. I was crying every day and I just had no ability to adapt. I was miserable. And like my personal life was okay, but it had started to seep out into my personal life as well. And I went to a spa, this actually same spa where I do my meditation retreats. And this is on purpose, not by accident, not just a coincidence, but they had this program with horses, like mindfulness programs with horses. And I was sitting in the swimming pool. I was there with two of my doctor friends at the spa. And I was in the pool with this couple from Seattle, in my mind, this hippie couple from Seattle, and they were there for their honeymoon. They had eloped. And they said, you've got to do this program with the horses. It's amazing. And I said, I don't do stuff like that. Like, that's not for me. And they were like, no, you have to do it. You have to do it. So I finally agreed to do it. My two friends wouldn't do it with me. And it was one of those there were a couple different exercises. One of them, you kind of had to overcome your mental obstacle to be there present with the horse, that they would lift their hoof up and then you could clean it. And then another one was how you can, like, with just your intention and the way you walk and the way you are, affect how fast and in what direction a horse will go in a ring. I'm like totally not doing it justice, but it was this incredible program. And it was the first time where I had this sense that there's something out there that is not something beyond what I've been perceiving up till that point. I grew up Jewish. I am still Jewish, but I never really like connected to any spirituality in that space, and I was a religion major in college, but I just never, like, even though I was pre-med, but I just never had any glimpse of it. So I think that is what opened my brain up, that, and, very intense burnout. And at that point I was open to any experience that came my way. And the second experience that I encountered was someone told me they meditated twice a day. And I just like, I want to know everything. Tell me the things. And so he said, well, my teacher's coming to town. Come here and talk. And this is from a tradition similar to transcendental meditation, which is very much opposite from mindfulness, not opposite, but is a very much different approach to meditation. But not TM itself. This is a kind of offshoot of that. And excuse me. And I signed up for this course. In 4 days, I was meditating 20 minutes twice a day, and I felt better immediately. It was really powerful. Lost my road rage in 3 weeks, stopped crying every day. I was able to connect better to my patients, a lot better able to let go of my control freak tendencies, and which are still there, but especially in terms of patient care. And I felt a lot better, and it was great. And so I became with a thing that I thought I would least likely be, which is a meditator. And I loved it. And this is 2011. So 11 years ago, in 11 years, I have not missed a meditation. I've missed many other things in my life that are good for me, but meditation is non-negotiable. I went on a trip to India in 2014. I think it was 2014. And then kind of took the meditation to the next level. And my teacher asked me if I would ever consider being a teacher. And I was like, are you joking me? I'm a doctor. I don't do, magical people are teachers. I don't know what you're talking about. And he was like, no, it's a 3-month teacher training in India. You just have to have follow through and the ability, the desire to do it. So I set my goals on 3 months in India, always planning to come back and keep practicing hospital medicine in Chicago, because I didn't know that one would ever leave medicine. I didn't know that was a thing. And I didn't really want to. I was happy. It was fine. Once I started meditating, I felt much better. And then I had the opportunity I started to get this sense of like wanting something bigger. I had this sense like I'll wake up and I'll be 65 years old and I'll be fairly pleased with my career as a doctor, but I'll have some regret. I just started to have that notion, and I wanted to kind of kick things open a little bit and explore. And to me, that meant if my boss got recruited to a hospital in Iowa and wanted me to go with him, then I would do that. Like that was my paradigm, was I will be a hospitalist in a different state. And had the opportunity to move to China before I went to my teacher training in India. And I was like, you only live once, let's do this. So I left my job to move to China, never thinking I was leaving medicine for good, but I left to do that. And then I did my teacher training. And after that, I had been out of medicine for about 6 months. And I really just felt like, I don't know who that woman is who used to wear the white coat and do all the things. I didn't connect to her anymore. I had compassion for her and I loved her. And I was grateful that she was who she was. But it just, for me, going back to clinical medicine didn't feel like it resonated. And so I moved back to Atlanta, which is where I grew up, and started teaching meditation. Like I was, traveling to a few different cities and just kind of being a little bit of a nomad for a while. Until I got my footing in terms of growing a business, which is not something I ever expected to be doing. So you have to actually pay for rent and stuff when you teach these techniques, which is always a bit fraught. And so from there, I started doing that in 2016. I got back from my teacher training in April of 2016, and then became a tapping practitioner in 2019. I learned about tapping in 2017 when I was in a really bad place mentally. And I thought meditation fixes everything. I should be fine. I'm a meditation teacher. I'm broken. I shouldn't need help. But then I met this woman who's a tapping practitioner, and I did one session with her and felt like myself for the first time in months. And so after working with her for about a year and a half, became a tapping practitioner. Around that time, I also did some anti-racism trainings and never thought I'd be doing that professionally either. But part of the great things about meditation is opening up to receiving, I guess, what other things might be in store, and following what I feel passionate about. And that's my 20,000 foot version.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm tempted to go to 40,000 feet and beyond. But before we do that, maybe we'll find a way to get there. I'm most curious because, I've had somewhat blind, speaking of horses, I use this reference, blinders on in terms of the meditation world. Practicing MBSR and then becoming an MBSR teacher and then a teacher mentor, and now these groups and these recorded sessions. I've most of my life, although there's been some other meditations, including some chanting, most of my life it's been Vipassana meditation. So I personally am most curious about how you see the difference between, I guess, three things. One, transcendental meditation, mindfulness meditation or Vipassana meditation, insight meditation, and how you are now teaching meditation that sounds to me slightly shifted away from traditional TM.
Yeah, so that's a great question. What I've verged away from is kind of, how would we say, I'm trying to be political, but the mind control-y aspects of some organizations like TM. Yes. My teacher trained with TM for about 25 years and turned into his own mind control-y person. And so I have kind of left the community that sees him as enlightened guru being. I feel like there's a lot of spirit. So I guess I'm starting with why I'm not direct. I was never part of TM. I never learned TM. I learned what's called Vedic meditation. When I decided to leave my teacher in 2017, I started calling it conscious health meditation. I actually teach it fairly true to how I was taught to teach and how I was taught to meditate, in terms of the actual technique. With a couple changes. So the first is I developed an online course in 2019, one version for healthcare professionals that's accredited for CME, continuing medical education, and then another version that's for regular people. And it's called the rest technique. And it's totally against the rules of my meditation tradition teaching online. And a lot of that really it's a little pyramid scheming, and it's a little keeping the standard the same so that certain people are always going to be considered like higher up. And so I started to be a little bit of a disruptor in that space as well, doing what I could to keep the foundations of it the same, and the sanctity of it, I guess, the beauty of it. So I do have online offerings. And then the other thing I do is I've really tried to, in what I teach from a trauma-informed approach, and tried to take the spiritual arrogance out of it, tried to avoid the spiritual bypassing that is rampant. Wouldn't be enough to describe what the message that I was given as a meditation student, as I got more and more into the advanced meditation stuff and in my teacher training. And I find it, as I've kind of done my own work in the anti-racism space, thinking that was separate from wellness. It's totally not separate. And white supremacy culture and whiteness have their hooks into everything. And one of those is the wellness space, where everyone's like, just meditate and you'll feel better. And if you don't meditate enough, then you're doing it wrong, or there's something wrong with you. And you should, there's just so many different, if you have a problem with the meditation practice, then it's an issue with you. There's a lot of different things that I really felt uncomfortable with for a long time and didn't understand why. So, we're sort of taught to be a little bit mysterious and mystical as we teach meditation. And I've taken that out completely. I still do a ceremony to honor the tradition, but there's no smoke and mirrors. I don't want to do any of that. I don't want anyone to feel like I am the I know there's a lot of space of like, we're all learners. No one's the teacher. I am still teaching the technique. So I can't delete that. I don't think I can undo that, or I'm not able to do that yet, but I try not to be guru, and I try to just be really honest about where I'm at. And yeah, I meditate twice a day, and I also have anxiety, and I do a lot of tapping, and I sometimes don't do the tapping because I like to feel bad. Sometimes, I'm human. And so I try to bring that aspect to it. And I think that part of what sells in the wellness industry is like people who are glowy and pretend like they don't have any problems, or maybe think that they don't have any problems. So I'll leave that part there. In terms of the difference in the techniques, what I teach is mantra based, but it's not a focused mantra practice. It's more like daydreaming. And the idea with what I do is use as little effort as possible. Sit comfortably, don't focus, don't concentrate, let the mind wander. There's a technique involved, but it's like minimal effort. If you have an itch, scratch it. If the thoughts come, don't do anything. Just like, we're not, there's no examining or sitting with. It's just, it is letting the mind do what it does, but it's less intentional, I guess. And in doing so, we're maximizing relaxation state and activating the parasympathetic nervous system. I think maybe perhaps a bit more directly. I haven't like measured it in comparing mindfulness and what I teach, but the whole idea is to use as little effort as possible to get your body into a de-excited state so that your body can repair itself and clear out stresses, stress scars, traumas that we've carried with us in our bodies since before we were born. And so it's a transcendental type meditation. And I think it's very easy to do. So a lot of people like it because, as you know, mindfulness can be difficult at first, and it can be challenging. And for people whose minds are used to being all over the place, it can feel a little bit like trying to herd a feral cat. And so for people who have tried that and not been able to, or who haven't even tried, who've been too afraid to try it, they feel like their minds are broken, and they're not broken. It's just our minds are our minds. And so this technique is just, it's easier. It's easy. And so you can do 20 minutes twice a day, starting on the second day. It doesn't get everything that mindfulness doesn't. Like they synergize. They're synergistic. So we're not going to be in this type of meditation focusing or concentrating on anything. We're going to do our best to be comfortable the whole time while we're sitting. And it has really profound effects, getting in touch with a different state of consciousness that is different from waking, sleeping, or dreaming, and being able to do that regularly, which is a state of consciousness that we pass through on our way between sleeping and waking and dreaming all the time. And it's amazing. And it's got its pitfalls as well, because I was sort of taught you become more mindful as you do this practice. But what can happen is if you don't acknowledge your shadow, and if you don't do your own work internally, and then you do these transcendental practices and you're like out, I mean, it's all inside here, but if you're like out here and you're not embodied in any way, it can cause bad people. It can create egos, and people who take advantage of their students and who are culty and not what they're saying they are. Even though they may have some spiritually advanced practices, it can kind of create a monster if you're not careful. So I teach, coming back to the way I teach, we do a resourcing practice. Part of the trauma-informed practice is to do a resourcing practice, getting into the body before we go into the transcendental aspect, and then we do our regular practice. And at the end, getting back into the body as well. I hope that answered your question. I'm happy to go into that any further if you'd like.
Well, I would. It's a beautiful answer. Thank you. It's very, very open of you to speak of it in this way, and I appreciate that. So the 60,000 foot view that I want to go to with it is around the transcendence.
Sure.
Experientially, what has that meant for you? Or how do you experience that?
So it's a little double-edged sword, because actual transcendence, you're going to the place of where your thoughts come from. So there's actually no awareness of yourself as an individual. So you don't know that you're there. Mm-hmm. Physiologically, like you can tell that you're there, heart rate drops, respiratory rate drops, all sorts of other indicators change. But what will happen is there'll be like a pocket of time where it's like, I remember doing the technique, and then all of a sudden I looked at the time and it's been 10 minutes. So there's ways to kind of circumferentially tell that you've transcended, but the actual lived experience of full transcendence is no perception of it, because there's no thoughts there. It's the source of our thoughts, and the mantra's not there either, which I think is really cool, but it's also a bit of a bummer for people who are like, but I want to clear my mind of thoughts. But they want to be there to witness that. But if you're witnessing it, you're having thoughts generally about witnessing it. And there's obviously people who are very advanced meditators who are able to perhaps witness that state, but not a lot of people are able to get there. But coming in and out, so if you think about the meditation practice as you're doing it the mind is a swimming pool, and the top is the surface level and the bottom is transcendence. My meditation practice that I do and that I teach is not go down here and stay down here. It's an in and out. It's a weaving the whole time. It's coming in and out. When you're coming out and when you're just about to get to transcendence, there are experiences more and more as you continue the practice and your brain is able to perceive it. But there are some very blissful, wonderful, sometimes trippy feelings, but often just stuff like my head feels heavy, or I can't feel my arms, or I feel like I'm leaning over, but I'm not. So just stuff where you're sort of, that there's an altered state of consciousness. And for me, that was a very positive feedback kind of thing, where I could have those experiences on the first and second day of the class and be like, oh my God, this is happening. I'm having a meditation experience, and feel like I'm doing this. That's the lived experience of transcendence. That's the like physical in the moment, because it's so restful. That state of consciousness, and based on physiologic studies they've done, helps me and my students to feel more adaptable. I can go with the flow more, and I'm not like telling myself to go with the flow. I'm just going with the flow. We call it adaptation energy. This ability to just kind of roll with things, to adapt to change, to not fly off the handle when so-and-so looks at me funny, or I don't get an email that I wanted to get, or whatever else. So having access to that physiologically, like in my waking state, is great, but it also has this bigger spiritual aspect that perhaps that's what you're getting at as well with your question. I didn't think this existed. I didn't know this was accessible. And then all of a sudden I start meditating, and I'm bringing that state into, every time you meditate, you're kind of activating it and bringing it into waking state. And like synchronicity starts to happen, and the world just feels a little more sparkly and interesting, and some profoundly deep meditation experiences as well. But in meditation, but just outside meditation, things feel more connected and more, I don't know, less alone, I guess. I felt like when I first started to meditate, I said, I remember knowing that I was onto something, and I didn't know where it was going or where it was leading or what it was, but I felt like I was being supported as I was on the journey. And so that's been really cool. And I think the pitfall of that is we're all one thing, like, can't we all just get along and not think about the bad things and just be blissful all the time? And I think for me, the meditation has allowed me to be wrong over and over again and realize my unlearn things that I've learned about society and my own role in society, and have resilience and be able to recover, be able to realize these horrible, horrible things about about the way our society treats people who don't look like me, and be wrong and be willing to like shake myself to my foundations, because that's actually how you make real connection, not hiding in my spiritual bubble, but by actually kind of dismantling everything that I thought I knew. So I think the meditation, while it's very tempting to use it as this like bliss machine and making me want to feel good, it's actually a really cool tool to get out in the world and start making change, and do it in a way where one has more regulation of my emotions. And that is a direct result of transcending. Or maybe it's indirect, but it's being there enough that my nervous system is able to kind of rewire my stress response to some extent, and then I can show up in the world in a different space. I'll stop there.
Yeah. You're using your practice in ways that are very helpful, I'm sure, for everybody that you meet and all that you're engaged in. Interesting. Really, really interesting, and so many places to possibly go with it. But as we're here with your work on anti-racism and being out in the world with it, let's stay right here with that. And sure. What does that look like for you, and how is that manifesting?
Well, it's interesting that the work I do in anti-racism is all about embodied approach. I don't teach this type of meditation in that work at all. It's helped me become who I am as I evolve. The work I do in the space started as I was attending. First off, I'll say, like, I always thought of myself as like a super well-intending liberal white lady who was not racist. Like, that was just how I saw myself. And then I got called out for being privileged by a blog post I wrote after the 2016 election. And I was like, what? I'm not that, you da, da, da. By a white friend of mine. That's when I started to really read and learn. And I realized that, like, my mindset of I am a well-intending white woman, liberal, not racist, is like the most dangerous thing that can possibly be, because it's not being willing to acknowledge a different reality. As I've gotten more and more training and experience, I went to this training and we were talking about different ways that the dominant culture can show up, the dominant culture that holds up systemic racism, things like defensiveness and perfectionism. This is the work of Tema Okun, Temaokun. All of these things, this sense of urgency, this fear of being uncomfortable, those are all parts of culture that hold up and perpetuate racism. So the question was, in this workshop, how do you recognize it? And I was like, well, it's just in my body. Like, I just feel myself getting defensive. And then and realizing that that's not something that is necessarily, that necessarily comes naturally to people. And so my final project for that training was creating, I'd already called my meditation practice Conscious Health Meditation. So conscious anti-racism, which was conscious making a repeated decision to, every time I'm living my life, everything I say, don't say, don't do, that's a conscious decision whether or not I'm being anti-racist. So it's that conscious mindful thing, but also where I feel it in my body, and being aware of my own reactions and the way that I've been programmed, and what I'm bringing into spaces that I need to be able to emotionally regulate myself so that I don't end up going in and causing harm to people who have a lived experience of racism. It basically started as like a progression of basic, like 5 senses meditation, and then kind of moving into more of a body feeling, learning how to feel emotions in the body. We use self-compassion, we use tapping, we use shadow work. And then I partnered with my partner, Dr. Maiysha Clairborne. I started doing this work as a white woman, not wanting to take on some of the burden of helping white people be better informed and better prepared when they try to do anti-racism work. Never in my mind, never in a million years thinking that anyone would ever want to work with me, like to join me. And then I met Maiysha, who's a physician. She's a yogi. She does integrative medicine. She's a neuro-linguistic programming practitioner and master. And so she's amazing. And she's like, hey, Jill, have you ever thought about working with a Black person? Because right now you're lacking that perspective. And I was like, yes, like, will it be you? I just never thought that I would, I don't know, be worthy of that, I guess. And so we partnered together. And then as we did that, everything just kind of blossomed and flourished. And as we learned more about trauma and how that shows up in racialized bodies in different ways, and somatics, and just like it just kind of reinforces the approach. And these tools are not just used for white people; they're used for everybody in different ways. A lot of work with internalized racism for me, and I'm working through an internalized anti-Semitism. And there's just lots of different ways these tools can be used, and that's through our partnership, through our modeling our communication with each other. We constantly have to sort of check ourselves and ask ourselves if dominant culture, if white supremacy culture is how, not just if, but how it's coming into an interaction. It's been amazing. I mean, it's challenging, amazing work. And I've been able to interact with so many incredible people. So we have courses and do live trainings, and we have a book, and we're revamping our course right now. And we've been involved in some research studies that have actually had some really great outcomes. So it's an honor to be able to participate in any way. Always being mindful of the fact that I am still a white passing woman, and learning from me is not enough. Learning from me might be comfortable for some white people, and that might get to a certain point, and then it's moving out into the world and learning from other people.
Wow, wonderful. And we'll have links to your website, your courses, the book underneath the video. What would you like us to know out of all the work that you do? And we probably should talk a little bit about tapping too. But more along the lines of what's here for you now. If you could let us know anything that was really important to you, that was in your heart, you wanted our community of mindfulness meditation teachers to know, and the greater world, because who knows who will listen to this, what would that be?
Oh gosh. I think be willing to be wrong and use the tools that you've developed, that one has developed in these tools, these mindfulness tools. That's where it's at. That's the juice, connecting into the body, what it feels like to be wrong, using these tools to, not just in anti-racism spaces, but everywhere, learning how to make mistakes and be human, recognize our own humanity and have compassion for that and still learn from it, I think.
Yeah, thank you.
I don't know. How was that?
Well, I think you do know. What I'm hearing from you is a real importance around what we'll define as spiritual bypass and an avoidance of that, and an ability to admit we're wrong or we have racism or whatever it might be, in the service of honesty and openness and common humanity and compassion. So that feels to me like this is really important to you. Mm-hmm. as well as I'm sure to all of us that are here listening. Yet achieved to different degrees, and we fail at it miserably most of the time. At least I'll speak for myself, before I label that on everybody. This isn't easy. This isn't easy. So we have to let go of some kind of perfection around it. How does that land for you? The letting go and the allowing.
Self-compassion, 100%. I think meditation was my first love, tapping, second love. Right now, self-compassion is where I'm at, and drinking it up as fast as I can, because I'm so not comfortable with it. I'm getting better, but it's recognizing the impacts of trauma in the way that we all behave and interact in the world, and then healing from that trauma and having self-compassion along the way. That's, I think, the only way to do it. Because the self-compassion, as you obviously know, like, it's for the self, but then it extends outwards. And then it's like, oh, okay, if I can make I can allow myself to make mistakes. Maybe I can allow other people to make mistakes, and I can have some conversations with people that I don't think I would be able to have conversations with. Or I just had a total flail on Facebook, back and forth. I'm mad and I'm, saying all these things, and I'm so filled with shame afterwards. Or I just said something offensive and I'm so filled with shame afterwards. How can I stop centering myself, like have compassion, stop centering myself, and do the work to repair what needs to be repaired, and or do the work to show up differently in a different next time.
Yeah. Thank you. And where are you working with cultivating self-compassion? How is that?
All the time. I have like a bigger practice that I like to do that I don't do nearly enough. But my therapist that I see is all about self-compassion. And so bringing it into spaces where I feel myself, I'm a stepmom, I'm a new stepmom, fairly new. And bringing it into that space, bringing it into business ownership, being nervous about certain things happening or not happening. Any moment I can think of it. I have anxiety. So when I see as I'm able to recognize my brain going down the rabbit hole of obsessing about an email or an interaction, I think everyone's got like different, I don't know, species or phenotypes of anxiety. So mine would be like obsessing about things I said or didn't say, or what someone else, an interaction perhaps, on email or otherwise. And so when I feel myself going in that rabbit hole, pausing and just saying, okay, I'm feeling this. Ooh, I'm feeling it. And then I like to put my hand like on my shoulder here and just like telling myself whatever I want to hear, whatever I feel like I would need to hear in that moment, and letting myself feel that. And it doesn't necessarily make it go away. And that's not the point, as you know, and I'm sure everyone here already knows, but it helps me get out of the spiral, and it helps infuse some peace and calm into those moments that would potentially be kind of disruptive and difficult.
Yes, thank you. Have you taken any training in teaching self-compassion?
I haven't. I read Fear Self-Compassion, so I'm team Kristen Neff for sure. I hadn't read any of her stuff before that, but not officially. I mean, I've been doing some. When I do guided meditation, I do self-compassion practices, but I didn't know about backdraft. I didn't know about that. I knew that everyone had different experiences and wanted to normalize that, but I think I do that in a much more trauma-informed way now, which is really good. So I have not gotten formal training, but I love it.
Okay. Tell me about tapping. That sounds like a very self-compassionate act.
I love tapping. It's so good. So I first learned about it at a medical conference for women where I was teaching my meditation course. And I thought it was really interesting, but I didn't pursue it any further until I was in the active process of extricating myself from my meditation community and like seeing and learning the hard truths that I sort of had seen, but didn't want to see. And it was excruciating. It was really, really difficult time, and met this woman who's a tapping practitioner. And I had tried other things, and nothing worked. I was so disembodied at that point. Like when she was like, where are you feeling this emotion? I was like, what do you mean? I didn't feel, I was disconnected because I was just so emotionally spent. So we did one session, and I felt, as I mentioned, like myself for the first time in months. And I continued to work with her. A lot of self-limiting beliefs. I'm in a wonderful relationship now with my partner, and previously had not been able to I think tapping was a huge thing for me and to show up in a relationship in a healthy way, seeing where it's about my stuff versus his stuff, and knowing when I need to advocate for myself versus, apologize. So it's helped in that way. Yeah, I loved it. And I think for me, what was so huge about it was letting go of this, I have to be perfect. I sort of was indoctrinated it sounds ridiculous now looking back, but I was sort of indoctrinated in my teacher training, like, you are all now these spiritually advanced beings, and like, you don't need anything else. This is it. It's just meditation, and you just do this practice. And then when you start to feel real, when you start to feel broken and imperfect and human, then you feel like there's something wrong, and then you have to hide it. Like, it's shameful. And so asking for help was a huge thing, acknowledging what I was going through. And so the tapping itself, it's called the emotional freedom technique. If I'm sure some of you have heard of it, maybe some of you have not, has its roots in traditional Chinese medicine and acupuncture. And by tapping on these different energy centers of the face and chest and saying out loud what is bothering us, distressing us, it sends calming signals to the brain, to the stress center of the brain, and helps rewire the response. And it's great. It was I believe really it's evidence-based, and some of the earliest data is about PTSD and treating trauma patients at the VA. The women I met who first taught me about it are psychiatrists and psychologists who worked at the VA. So it's great for phobias and trauma and PTSD and self-limiting beliefs and pain, grief, any uncomfortable emotion, shame, all of it. It works. And it works in a lot of other ways too. It can be a little bit more new agey as well, which can be really fun, I think, to explore ways that you can use it for creating positive change as well. And what I love about it is it's a way to sit at the discomfort and still be active and feel better quickly, but not be spiritually bypassing. So it's like, I'm sitting in this, I'm feeling it, I'm saying it out loud over and over again. I'm really letting myself feel what I need to feel. And then I can process it, and it processes in a way that we get insight. It's not just, oh, I feel better now, bye-bye, but it's like, oh, well, maybe if I this, or this feels like this, or I know what this is about. We get these kind of aha moments called cognitive shifts in the tapping. So that's one thing that I really love about it. And I'm facilitating it for other people. It's not my thoughts. It's their own subconscious that they're able to finally hear, because we're tamping down the stress or sort of peeling it back like an onion. There are very few side effects other than it can be emotionally intense. So when I'm working with my clients with trauma, for example, there's a very contained, stepwise, trauma-informed approach so that we're not just like diving into it. And there's ways to re-regulate if needed. But usually it's just signs of parasympathetic nervous system activation, yawning, sighing, tears, and a whole lot of people feeling better very quickly. I've used it a ton during COVID. I was introduced to you by Dr. Nichang Liang, who started the Mindful Healthcare Collective, right, like March of 2020, and gathered nine women. I don't know if it was intentionally women, but it is 9 women who do some sort of healing wellness work. There's coaches, and then I do tapping, and Nichang does mindfulness, and you can do it over Zoom. I can do it live. I can do it Zoom. I can do it one-on-one. I can do it in a group. I can do it pre-recorded. I mean, it's so flexible. And so we just have been offering free sessions for the last 2 years, and people will come and just bring their dark emotions around COVID. And it's amazing the work, the response that people can have. And it is, depending on how deep you go with it, it can be quite long lasting. So I've loved it because the meditation I teach is great, but it requires, I'm teaching people a technique, and it requires either 4 days in a row, about 2 hours each day, or requires an online course that's 15 modules, and I can't guide it. I can't just be like, all right, let's do it now, without having learned it before. So tapping has been incredible because you don't have to practice it regularly. You don't ever have to have done it before. You don't ever have to do it again. It's not this whole burden of taking on. There's no like learning curve. It's just like show up. It's guided. So I'm doing the work for people. You can tap on your own once you're comfortable with it, but it's like, okay, I'll just repeat after this person, knowing that I'm not inside someone's brain. And I always encourage people to change what I'm saying if it doesn't resonate, but it's very flexible. It's very embodied. Part of what we do is check in with where we're feeling the emotions in our body, and the physical manifestations of our emotions. I can't get enough of it. It's such a great tool. And it feels a little bit like my magic power because I can like go into this group and help people feel better immediately. And that's amazing, and not cause harm. I think there's ways to make people feel good that also cause harm. And I do my best to avoid that.
And how often personally are you in tapping practice?
Oh Lord, I don't do it enough. When I tap with my clients, I'm tapping with them. So on some level that regulates my nervous system as I'm tapping, we're co-regulating. I usually use it as needed if I'm real upset about something. But now that I've been seeing a therapist for like the last 6 months or so, and I just kind of like going to her and my problems instead of like solving I don't know. Sometimes it just feels nice to have someone else do it for me because I'm always holding space for other people. So she doesn't do tapping, but it's been fun to explore self-compassion in addition to tapping. So, I mean, I would say like over Thanksgiving was probably the last time I remember like really like, I got to get myself in another room to process this familial interaction so I can enjoy the rest of my day. And so I took myself away and that helped me feel a lot better. And I'm sure I've done it in between then too, but it's one of those things where I'd meditate 20 minutes twice a day, no matter what. If I did tapping the way I could do it, it would be a total, even more of a game changer. I'm a human being and I don't always do the practices that I probably could do.
Well, that's true of all of us.
Give myself the compassion. Exactly.
Yeah. Well, in a way of closing, I'd just like to ask this question. If you could see your work develop to its fullest extent, dreaming big, where do you see yourself and where do you see the work you're doing growing? How do you see it growing and where do you see yourself with it?
I think that if I can contribute in any way to people acknowledging and healing their traumas, particularly in like equity and social justice spaces, helping people to connect with who they are and what they're feeling and helping them heal from the trauma of being on the receiving end and or practice compassion for oneself as they're trying to grow and stretch and be better. Compassion for internalized oppression. If I can teach people how to do that so that they can then go and do even more work in the space, that is all I could ever want, to have an actual impact in that space and not just have it be something I'm talking about in my office on my Zoom screen. Like, as like a lot of the work I do is, I'm not just talking about this one. I'm talking about like my courses and everything's been so virtual, but for people to actually go out in the world and change the way they're behaving or feeling about themselves. I think any way I can do that is great. And if that means through our online course, if that means live trainings or, hopefully retreats for that in the future, I'm open to anything. I'm not the best at the, like, what do things look like in the future, because a year later I'll come back and everything will be different. But really wanting to use this embodied approach, bringing an understanding of trauma into everything I do.
Wow, beautiful. Well, thank you, Jill. Thank you for sharing your work, your time with us. Very, very wonderfully heartfelt work that you're doing in all those different areas. So thanks for being here. Yeah, our pleasure. And if you don't mind, if you have a few minutes to stay afterwards, if any of our Zoom community of teachers has questions for you, we could take a look at those. And then I know you might have to leave, so let's just see how that goes.
Sure.
Thanks again, Jill. And I just want to mention that our work here in this program, Views from the Field, is supported by our mindful teaching community and our volunteers. And I want to send gratitude for them and any donations that you might be able to make to help us continue this. We have our own big picture dreams as to where this may go and how we might build this out even further. That would be welcomed and most appreciated. So again, thank you, Jill, and we'll see you back continuing on Zoom in a little bit.
Click down below to join our Mindfulness Teacher Community Facebook group, where you're also invited to post and share. Also, subscribe to Sing to the Mountain Studio so you don't miss out on future recordings of live sessions.